Welcome to Hugging the Cactus and the Keep Going podcast. I'm Andy Signor. I'm so excited to be here with you to share some serious subjects, real talks, and I'm so happy to have someone I really have come to look up to. I'm really impressed with what he's done. Sean Chandler is here. Hey, Sean.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Sean, I appreciate you. You do an awesome YouTube channel for those that don't know. It's called Sean Talks Movies. You can check it out on YouTube. You can also find him on Twitter. Sorry, I dropped my mouse. You can find him on Twitter over at Kirk Never Died. Sean, you're doing really well on YouTube. It's a hard thing to crack, and you managed to get there. But I know it wasn't an easy journey for you. I know you had some struggles in your life, and I thought this would be I'd love to get in that. You were willing to share, and so I thought this topic of we talked about a little. Learned a little bit about your story, but this idea of how to get the strength to admit you're struggling is something that I really connected to as we were starring, and this show is all about trying to find those specific topics and get into them. But I want to share your story. So I want to talk about that figuring out when you realized you needed to admit you were having a struggle with. I think a lot of people struggle with, right? When admitting, oh, I have a problem or I need to do something. So before we get to that, I'd love to sort of talk about your background. So let's start at the beginning. I know you had your father. This story is going to talk about alcoholism and a lot of stuff, but let's start back early. Tell me where we can start. Your dad originally had problems with alcoholism, yes?
Yes. Yeah. There's a good bit of alcoholism in my family. And I believe my grandfather on that side of the family for a period of time also struggled with it. But, all my memories from childhood of spending time with dad were basically of him drunk when he got home. He was a highly functioning alcoholic. He was a very successful businessman, was an early employee for Dell, so knew Michael Dell by name and stuff like that. So, but he would just get so drunk every single night and be able to go to work the next day and still be productive and successful. And when I was in high school, a doctor told him, man, if you don't quit drinking, you're not going to see your son graduate. And he quit drinking for a little bit. And then he got divorced for a third time, started back up, was living by himself, and just kind of descended into this drinking. And so when I was 20 years old, he drank himself to death. And so for me, I always assumed I probably had alcoholic genes. I assumed I really should probably stay away from this stuff. I'll get myself in trouble if I ever head down that path. So always be very, very, very cautious. I always knew that.
Who instilled that? He was like your mom. Where did you get that idea? You made that yourself, your own choice, or did you have a support system around you that helped you sort of be mindful of it? You know what I mean?
I think it was just enough of a knowledge of the way drinking kind of works, and there's a genetic component that a lot of times family members that I just knew, just watching him, that this was probably not a good idea. So like when I was in high school, I have no stories of going to a party and drinking. Some of that was maybe I just happened to be in the right group of friends that didn't head in that direction or anything like that. But I never really drank alcohol even before my 21st birthday. Sipping a beer right here, whatever, but, no underage drinking or any rebellious behavior or anything like that. Until even after my father was dead and I turned 21, was the first time I ever had anything to drink at any significant amount.
Was the loss of your father then sort of what made you choose to drink then? Obviously was it the sadness and sort of a test of your own will? No,
it kind of strange the way it kind of played out. And it kind of leads into what becomes the recurring theme, but it is a little bit what you just touched on. But I don't know, 6 months after my dad died, a year after my dad died, a very good friend of mine that I spent a lot of time with, a very strange incident happened where he was found in the theater department at the high school with a rope around his neck hanging. Clearly looks like a suicide. And through the way it played out, I kind of was the one that had to go tell my friend, and they caught him in time, put the brother in a coma. So he was iced down to try and keep him better. And the guy has claimed it wasn't a suicide attempt. It was just a weird accident. But it was kind of one of those strange incidents. And so that night, that guy came over to my house and he's like, brought some alcohol over. And he's like, hey, man, I just need to decompress. So we're just at my house. I'm over 21. There's just no, sure, man, if you want to decompress by drinking, whatever, let's do this. And so that's the first time I ever really drank. First time I ever got drunk was this incident where processing his brother's in a coma. And I had fun. It was normally fun to drink. And the first time you enjoy that type of social lubrication, it's like, oh, this is actually pretty cool. Okay, I can actually see the appeal in this now.
Right.
And then the next time I ever drank was like my grandma died. The whole family was getting together at the post funeral get together, and I drank. And that kind of what it turned into for several years there is just when something bad happened, I would drink, but nothing. It was always don't drink more than once per month. I was always kind of putting these cautions in place. And then after I'd been married, right at our 1 year anniversary, our apartment got broken into, and like we got cleaned out. And we'd been out of town for the weekend, came home, went to open the door, and the deadbolt lock or the chain lock was on the inside. We're like, wait, how would we even lock this? That doesn't make any sense. And we looked through, and everything was just turned over. We're like, oh crap. And so it just kind of turned into the first time where I ever just drank for a week. Like every free time, it was break. I was on vacation basically, so I could just drink without any concern. And it's the first time I ever did that as a coping mechanism for tragedy. That just seemed to be the recurring pattern in all of this. And so the thing we hadn't touched on too much, that I was going to school to work in church world. So graduated from college shortly after this, where we got broken into, and became a youth pastor at a church. So basically working with the teenagers. So I would teach Sunday the class for the high schoolers and the middle schoolers, counsel high schoolers, do a lot of event planning, but working with teenagers and back up, doing a little bit of preaching, that sort of thing. And yeah, I wasn't at a church that was in any way hypercritical of drinking. You know, one of the elders at the church openly brewed his own beer, and you know they would do wine drinking at some of the men's and women's retreats and stuff like that. So it wasn't like drinking was anything that would have been frowned upon. And if anyone saw the amount that I drank at this point in time in my life, no one would say like, this guy's got a problem. They would just be like, oh, in light of your family history, maybe you should be a little bit more cautious. But I mean, it was very much intentional with kind of control. And then the first couple of years I was at the church, a lot of just kind of stuff went down. The most church drama I've ever been a part of happened in that first 2 years I was there. Just coincident, there's some stuff happened, and I became the target of a bunch of people. So I was under a lot of stress, but there was also a bunch of really great things that happened. And as a guy that was like 26 years old, didn't really know how to process a lot of it. So then it turned into Sunday nights the way that I, and then my Sundays were very long days because we church Sunday morning, and then I had to, we were a portable church, so I'd have to set everything up, tear everything down, set up somewhere else, and I do an event with teenagers, so it'd be like 18-hour days on Sundays. So I was running on Red Bull all day long, highly stressful, and so I would decompress Sunday nights by drinking a little bit, and kind of set that as a pattern. Once per week, it's okay. And then if anything else happened, if there's any something else stressful, hey, something bad happened. There's always that excuse. Something bad enough happened to kind of break some of these rules I set for myself.
Well, and I was going to ask, was that's always what triggered it, or were there times in success where you're like, I had a good day, you know what? Let's celebrate. It was always.
Yeah, I mean, sure, there was some celebratory. There was some occasional just kind of for fun. I don't, whenever my 30th birthday rolled around and some buddies came over. I mean, there was some of there's just the fun one too from time to time.
So it was growing from just the tragedy to celebrate. That's why I'm just trying to get the yeah, okay.
There's some of that in there, yeah. But it was trying to never. And I guess the other problem I always had was that I was never the guy that could just drink one beer. I was never the one beer guy. It was always like, if I'm drinking, let's go for it. And I think that's just some part of my personality of why could I be successful on YouTube, because I just have like, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to do it. And that tied into drinking as well. And so I kind of had this pattern that was once per week and then maybe twice per week. And I remember one specific day, about 2011-ish, where I had something to drink, and my wife had seen me drink. And I remember going to our kitchen and being like, I want to drink. I know I should stop drinking. It's a bit like, and I thinking, I know she won't want me to, so I better keep it from her. And like even doing something funny, like moving the door of the refrigerator just so that she couldn't see where I was at, and pouring myself a couple more shots so I could drink just a little bit more without her knowing. And I had this thought, wait a minute, isn't this what alcoholics do? Oh, wait. Why? And I, rationalizing back and forth, like I know this is the behavior of an alcoholic, but I'm only doing so much. There's always a series of rationalizations where even though I was crossing a boundary I'd set for myself of what I thought was wise for me, some rationale and justification. And where everything kind of started to just fall apart, crumble in December of 2012, where key context here, I was working with teenagers at a church. And so a 16-year-old girl from a very prominent family committed suicide, very popular at the high school, family very well known in the community. And I mean, shot herself in the head. And it rocked the community. And so they kind of brought in all the pastors, any social workers to help with kids on site at the high school. And so then I spent like a whole day just counseling kids on suicide. And I'm actually a highly introverted person. People assume because I can do on stage stuff, because I'm a YouTuber guy and wave my hands around real fast, that I'm very extroverted. I'm not. And I actually am not wired very well to be a pastor at all. I'm wired very well to be an event person, a personality, but the pastoral side of sitting down counseling people is very taxing on me.
Well, it's taxing on anybody. I mean, that is
Sure, yeah,
that's the tragedy of then having all these kids to
absolutely.
come to you to help you get through that. When you're probably having your own serious thoughts, that's intense. Yeah.
And so then it kind of turned into because the person was so well known, it had big trickle down in all sorts of kind of different ways. And then going into 2013, it was this year where about every 2 or 3 weeks, someone died that was under the age of 60. Just a year of tragedy, basically. And people were in car accidents and just all sorts of things that were just kept triggering, like, well, this is a good excuse. This person died. And then 4 months after that suicide, another suicide happened. It was one of my students from my church. Like, he was in my small group. And I'd known him very well for the previous 4 or 5 years, knew his parents very well. I was at his house right after it happened, talking with his parents. And I was already running on empty when that happened. And it was right before summer season, which was my busiest season work-wise at the church. And it just kind of turned into every day was an excuse. And I just very quickly went from once a week drinking, 2 times per week drinking, to this is what I'm doing all the time. And it went from I'm drinking because of sadness to that the actual addiction took over. I need to drink because I'm awake. And like always thinking, how can I get another drink and how do I keep it a secret from my wife? And so that probably started about summer, probably all of 2013. I don't know the exact time frame on when that transition took place, but it was the escalation was very quick from when that suicide happened, and just so much stress that I just drank for tragedy, and then the addiction took over. So by February 2014, my first daughter was born, and my wife was like, "You've got to get help. Like, this is getting out of control. Like, you have to do something." And this is where fear took over. This is where the fear side of it was like, "Wait, you're right. This is no longer. It was a bad day, so I drank. I'm just drinking, and I'm lying about it a lot."
Well, and I was going to ask that. Was she because that's that struggle of asking for the help, right? Then was she? How much had you really told her? Had she been seeing that you were drinking too much and trying to stop you, and you shrugged it off and it's fine? Was there some of that going on?
Yeah, I mean, it was when there's a big tragedy, she wasn't like, "What? Why are you drinking on this bad?" Like, she certainly.
But you were saying you started drinking daily. She had noticed that. Did she know you were?
She knew it was increasing. She knew it was escalating, but I knew she wouldn't want me to do that. And so then it turned into, how do I hide this?
Right. That's what she knew. She wasn't aware of how extreme it was getting. Is what I was just making sure.
But then she became aware that wasn't aware. She became aware of the lying,
which is even worse. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so that's where the real nightmare, where the real damage to the marriage, to my family, and really to myself came in, to where it was like, I can't stop doing this, and I'm lying to keep doing it. And at the core of it, I was afraid if I do all the things I need to do, that I know I need to do to get help, then I'll probably lose my job. If my skill set is tied to church world, I don't know what I would ever do if I wasn't in church world. That's my brain couldn't think beyond what other job I would get. And having been through all of this, the realities, those weren't unfounded. Like, when I when well, when we get to it, um, I couldn't really easily find a job. I didn't know what to do, and I have all these skill sets that are very useful, but I had the um, everyman version of it. Like all these, I know how to do all these things, and so I was just afraid. What will I do if I find out? So February 2014, daughter's born. Wife is like, we can't do like you're this is getting out of control, and there more and more kind of weird escalation type things were happening. And so she's like, you need to go help. So I started going to AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, but I wasn't really sold on it. It was like me still just trying to willpower through stopping. So I would stop for 2 months and then I would like hard relapse. And then I would stop for 2 months and hard relapse. And every time I'd relapse, I'd try and keep it a secret. So the trust was broken more and more and more. And with the way drinking works, like you go back to as bad as you were, except your body's kind of adjusted. So you start doing serious damage to your body. And I just didn't even know a lot of that. And then a year after that, she finally like, I'm gonna leave you if you like. I mean, it was like these sorts of like, you have to stop. And so I had about 9 months of just stopping kind of willpower wise, but it was they call it being kind of like a dry drunk of you still have all the deception, you still have all the issues, even though you're not drinking. And so I had like 9 months of that where I was mostly pretty successful. And then some stuff started happening. Like I was looking for to work at a different church, and it was kind of time to move on. And that just led to a ton of stress because I'd been there for 8 years at this point in time. So this is going to 2016, and I had some really big setbacks. Didn't get a job, and it's just real heartbreaking. And I just hard relapsed, and I was just like basic out of control. I mean, bonkers out of control. Up to this point in time, I'd been a very functional alcoholic that only my wife knew something was, and my mom knew something was up. I'd been able to use my social awkwardness to cover up for hangovers and stuff like that. And then leading into June of 2016, I mean, I just like, it had completely taken over. I was out of control. So right before the biggest event that I did at the church every year, it's like a week long retreat with a group of teenagers where I'd take 150, 200 teenagers off somewhere, had this hard relapse. It was acting weird at church, that like very off. I mean, and someone finally noticed. And so we go to this event, and I'm in withdrawal. I'm having withdrawal symptoms at this event, and a guy started confronting me like, "What's wrong? Like, have you been drinking? Like, I've seen weird you. I've never seen you like this. I've never whatever this is. This is something different." It's like, no, man. I haven't been sleeping well. I haven't been feeling well. All of those things were true, but they were symptoms of like alcohol.
Right.
They're all related to the drinking. And so I lied to the
Still
guy for a
struggling with
day.
exactly. You still weren't comfortable to tell any of these people the real struggle you were having.
And so that but so this guy confronting me, that gave me just enough of a like, wait, like, okay, is this thing about to collapse on me? And the guy basically is like, man, I trust you, I believe you, but if you're this off, you need to go home and get a good night's sleep, whatever you need to do. So I go home 2 days into this event. So it's unheard of for me to go home 2 days into this event unless I'm sick, and show up at my house, and my wife is there, and she's like, what are you doing home? I was like, well, Brent sent me home because he thought I was acting weird. What do you mean you're acting weird? Like, well, he thought I'd been drinking. And so to her knowledge, I haven't had anything to drink in basically 9 months. She's like, why did he think that? Because because I had been drinking the night before heavily, and it was lingering in my system. And she's like, and so she was basically done. She's like, you have to like this. I said that I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not doing this anymore. You're going to go tell them, or I'm going to tell them. I was like, well, we can't do it right now. We got to wait. And more excuses, more lies, more trying to manipulate things. And then that night I was trying to sleep, and I couldn't. And I'd been hearing like weird things the last 2 days. And I just started like, let me just Google search symptoms of like, of withdrawal. And I start reading about it, and I start realizing like how serious my symptoms are. Like I'm having auditory hallucinations, and I start reading it, and I watched my dad die from drinking. And I'm like, it's only about 10 years earlier than this. And it was like, wait a minute, this is 15 years earlier. So I'm seeing the patterns that were happening in my dad before he died. Like, oh crap. Like what? Wow. And it was the thing that kind of like snapped me out of it. And at 5 a.m, I woke my wife up and I said, I'm done. We're doing this now. This is going down. So I called up my mom at 5 in the morning, said, hey, we're coming over to drop the kids off. I'm going to go into an emergency care clinic, do whatever they need to flush my system. And I'm going to tell the church everything, give them the full, I'm going to own this whole deal. And that was yeah, first week of June 2016 when that went down.
Wow. And then that was the turning point for you. You were able to keep it since then.
Mm-hmm. So
I mean, bravo for you to find that. So I have some questions because it's I'm sure a lot of people who are watching can relate or are stuck in that. What it was because you had so many people in your life who were so obviously important to you, giving you those warning signs. You saw it. And I think even beyond just alcoholism, I can, in my own infidelity, I can relate to this story, right? A lot of people are sometimes living a lie or hiding something or afraid to admit something. I want to talk about that, but why, even your own wife, like, why do you feel, it sounds like your wife's amazing and was able to stand by a lot of that, right? And kept trying to get you to those things. What do you think it was that just made you keep not being able to be honest to her?
I mean, it's just always the fear of consequences. And the lie in so much of this is you always keep telling yourself, oh, one more time. All right, I just want to have one more weekend. Like, I'm just going to, if I do this, then I'll stop Monday. And you stop for 2 days, and then there's always another excuse. There's always another reason. So I just kept running that through my head. I can fix myself tomorrow. I can fix myself next week. I can do this. This time it'll be different. And it's just a series of lies. And when everything came public, sent it out to the church and just owned it, or sent it out to the leadership of the church. And basically they're like, hey, let's not share this today because kids are in the middle of a week that's a little bit too important, but we're going to announce it on Sunday. And then there's a little bit of back and forth in it. But basically, whenever it was kind of announced to the church that it would turn into basically my resignation that Sunday. And then the church funded all of my rehab. They funded all of it. And then they funded
that's amazing.
For the next 3 months and did everything they could to help me try and search for another job. It didn't pan out, any of the stuff they did, but we're still at that church. We still volunteer there. And actually just 2 months ago, I preached in big church there again for the first time in 4 years. But they were great. Some people have horror stories about church, and you come forward with your sin and it's a nightmare for you. That wasn't my experience. There was a lot of grace involved in the whole process. And it was also a process where my wife was the one that had to take the blunt of it because people didn't want to talk to me about it because they didn't know how to approach me. So then she had to be the person, to be the middle person. And then they pointed fingers at her like, wait a minute, what did you know and when did you know it?
Right.
Wait, if you knew this, why didn't you, like, he's working with teenagers. He's a drunk. Did he drive teenagers? Did this happen? And there's all these questions that there's no good answers for. There's no answers that you could give that would be satisfying in either direction.
Right.
And no matter what you say, people assume a lot more. They fill in gaps because it's complicated.
Which is amazing that she was able to stick through it, but also it's got to be rough for you to know you're putting her through that, to have to make excuses or justify or make her seem like she was culpable in this, which she clearly wasn't. She was just trying to support you.
And then likewise, the church very suddenly at their busiest time didn't have a youth pastor, didn't have, like, there was things I could help with because I wasn't gone, but I wasn't doing the work anymore. So then all of my volunteers had to pull up the slack. My interns, I'd hired 2 interns 2 weeks before all of this, and then suddenly they had no boss.
Right.
And so I was just like all the people that I cared about, loved the most, my best friends, my family, they had to carry the weight of what I did.
Well, I think it's important because you're pointing out a lot of the reasons probably why you didn't do it, because all these things that are falling apart, the job, the people that rely on you, your wife, these are the reasons, right, why we keep secrets or don't, or think we can't. As we're getting to I want to share sort of the positive because, first of all, bravo on your sobriety and getting to this point, your success, you've managed to bounce back. But that struggle of coming to terms with that what do you advise people who are struggling with that? Well, I can't tell my wife, I can't tell my job, I can't tell my people. I feel like most people don't realize they're doing more damage by not telling versus the telling, right? Or do you have another feeling on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think it's filled with deceptions and lies at the core of it. And I'm coming from a religious perspective. And the religious word for some of this is sin. It was when you're lying to people and the bad stuff you do. And what I taught for years before this is sin makes you stupid. And then you have that moment where you realize I'm like the ultimate example of that, because this was also stupid. If 3 years earlier, whenever I first started getting out of hand, I said, went to the elder board and said, hey guys, for the last 2 weeks, I've been drinking because this is too much for me. They would have said, man, you need to take a month off and we're going to do what we can to make sure. And they would have helped me. But because it turned into I'm a full blown alcoholic, that for 3 years has been lying to them. There's like, obviously there's a lot of things that have to be worked through on that.
Right.
There's not like for good reason. And, the fear from, in my case, of when you're the drunk pastor, from my perspective, no church should hire me at that moment in time. I needed to work through a lot of things. I was not a person that should be in those types of settings. And so, all those fears of what would I do next kind of drove it. But because I kept lying, the sin, churchy word, grows in secret when you hide it. When it's the same thing as molds, funguses. Why, when you turn it over the log, as it grows? Because the gross stuff grows in secret. So the longer it's in secret, the bigger it grows, the worse it gets. And then I think this is certainly spiritually true, but true just in general. It says in James that God opposes the proud and gives grace to the humble. And pride is, man, I need to keep my reputation. Pride is, I can fix myself. Pride is, I can overcome this as long as I just put enough effort. And as long as I was trying to fix myself in secret, I've failed every single time really bad. And then when I got to the point in time where I said, I don't care what happens to me. I don't care what people think about me. I don't care about my job, my reputation. I care about getting me healthy. I care about my family. I care about my friends. I care about all of that more than I care about. I care more about being a good person and a healthy person than looking like a good and healthy person. And then, turned to churchy with it, surrendered in the spiritual sense of like I literally went to the leaders of the church and I said, whatever you guys want me to do, I'll do it. Like, I'm going to trust you guys to guide me. And whatever you tell me to do at this moment, I'm going to follow your lead to how I should get healthy, because my plan did not work. So I trusted the community of my church. And that was the transformative part for me. That it stopped being about me fixing myself and it became surrendering, trusting God, trusting my church community.
Well, I mean, and you need to be applauded because you did the hardest thing, which is admitting you had a problem, right? And I think that some people need to hit rock bottom before they can even address that issue. I mean, in my own case, like, right, I was a cheater, and I reached out to a friend once, and he didn't know how to respond, right? And I tried, like, I needed help, and I didn't know, and and then part of me is like, oh, I'm cheating. Maybe I should go to some treatment myself. And why am I cheating my wife? Like, maybe I'm a sex addict, whatever these things are. And then it scares you, like, well, crap, if I do that, all of this will be exposed. All of this will happen. So it is a real struggle that people have in various addictions or problems that they're going through. So kudos again to getting to a place where you could figure that out. What do you advise people? Like, how do people get there? Right? Is there advice you could have given yourself? Do you think you could have? Is there anything that could have changed it to help you find that discovery sooner? Or do you think you needed to get to the point you did?
Excuse me. The unfortunate thing, I think, is there's a side to it that you just have to get to that point in time where the pain of the same is greater than the pain of change. That you get to a moment that you go, I can't keep this up. I have to do something, and I don't care what it costs me. I'm going to make the change that I need to. And I don't know that there's something someone had said this, or if I'd heard that. I just had to reach that moment where it became clear, like, wait a minute, this is insane. I'm a hypocrite. I'm hurting myself. I might die. I'm propping up this thing around me. Like, what? There's so many bad things that could happen with the rate at which I'm getting more and more out of control. This has to stop. And it's tough because that moment, that place is different for everyone. Like, I went into an intensive outpatient program for 3 months where I worked for 3 nights a week for 3 hours. I would go to this program, and there's a lot of people in that group that were I related to heroin addicts. Suddenly, I wouldn't immediately went from being pastor 2 weeks earlier to sitting down with heroin addicts, being like, oh wow, everything they're saying, I can relate to that.
Right.
But at the same time, watching some of them being like, wow, they've gone so much further. They've paid so many more. Like some of them have been in car accidents with their children in the car, and their children were taken out of their custody because of it. And being in that moment, just well, like I'm so lucky. So many more things could have happened. So many worse things could have happened that I think all of that just snapped me out of it. And being on the other side was able to go, I don't ever want to go back. There's just nothing there that's appealing about that. And I've been incredibly lucky and blessed that to some extent, ever since that day where I'm going to rip the Band-Aid off or hug the cactus, and just went full open at acknowledging it publicly. I really haven't been all that tempted to drink alcohol because that process of hugging the cactus and everything it cost me made it so unappealing.
Good way
to do that again.
Good way to wrap around, because I was going to get there, and because I want to end here on sort of that positive note of you did it, and I think you were lucky, right? You were absolutely lucky in that there's so many horror stories of what can happen with alcoholism, and it's a real problem, and it takes courage to stand up. And I hope anybody who's going through it or finds a story, even one person can hear your story and think, you know what, I got to do what he did and try and make sure I can go do this. There are treatment plans, there are support groups, there are methods you can go out there to do, and you can also just talk to your loved ones and actually be honest. That's the biggest thing. I think it's going to be a core theme throughout all these episodes. If you can't be honest with the ones you love, there's a problem, right? That's a huge red flag that we all need to be well aware of to make sure we're not going down that path of why can't I tell my partner, right? So bravo. But yeah, you brought it up, the hugging the cactus. To me, that's that moment of when you look in the realization and you say, it's something I like to ask when it's relevant, but what was that moment for you specifically? Like, because it's hugging the cactus is right, embracing that pain, acknowledging you've done that wrong, and realizing I have to really own this, right? Talk just as we wrap up. What was that experience like for you?
Yeah, that was. It's that night in the beginning of June 2016 where I'd been sent home. My wife knows. She's like, this can't continue. And I start looking up stuff on withdrawal and everything and realize, like, I just have this absolute realization. For years, I'd thought, I can't drink because I'll end up just like my dad. And I'm sitting there reading the symptoms being like, oh, I'm just like my dad. I'm just only 20 years younger than he was when he died. And it just kind of all sunk in of like, I verbalized to friends that like I wanted to have kids so that to be a good example to them. Like I said that to people before I had kids, and then had kids, and I'm this out of control drunk. And our third child was born 2 years after I sobered up, and it's a totally different experience. And I'm realizing how much I don't even remember from my first two kids in those early years because I was just such a mess. And when I was at home at night, when I was with the kids, then I was drunk, and having that moment, just processing, like I've turned into my dad, I don't care what else happens to me, what the consequences are of getting healthy. I'm going to do that, and if that means I don't have a career anymore, I mean, I legitimately could not conceive of I could not think in any way what my future would be if I resigned. And the way it played out, like I delivered paint for 2.5 years. Like that's the only job I could get was picking up buckets of paint. And I was like, I was a leader and I was giving these speeches and I was in charge of people and I had a reputation. And now I pick up paint and I'm cut like.
But it's also kind of humbling and necessary as part of the process, don't you think? Yeah,
absolutely. I showed up to my job interview for this. This is literally happened. I showed up to a job interview for the paint job. And walk in, and I dressed up nice because it's a job interview, so new shoes and shirt and everything. And walk into the paint store, and it was like my neighbor had connections to the paint company. So walk into the office, and it's dirty, there's paint everywhere, everything's disheveled. The guy that's interviewing me clearly is significantly younger than me, and the questions are like, "Hey, like, could you pass a drug test?" Yeah, I could pass a drug test. Could you? Would you mind can you pick up 50 pounds? Like, yeah, I could pick up 50 pounds. All right, man, you sound like a great, like, I mean, like this amazing, like, candidate. And I was like, I was being in the meeting, like, oh, like, this is my new reality, just sinking in of like how much, like where I was to where this very short window of time. And I'd applied for some things and didn't hear back to anyone, no traction. And paint job is the one that I get some traction on. It's like, man. And I go home and I literally said to my wife, like, I think I'm going to have to take this job because I just need to have some income. But if this doesn't turn into something, I don't know how I'm going to make it. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do if I can't turn this into something. And that's where, kind of looping back to my YouTube channel. Why did I start my YouTube channel? Because I was unemployed and I had no friends, or I'd alienated my friends because I'd just come out as an alcoholic and I'd lied to all of my friends about it. So a month after all that goes down, I go to see the new Ghostbusters movies of all movies as a date night, trying to have a positive night with my wife. I don't know, and went home and I was like, oh yeah, I have a dormant YouTube channel I haven't done anything with. What if I posted a video? And it came out of this period of rebuilding my life. Why was I able to build a YouTube channel? Because I had a dumb job where I picked up buckets of paint and I went home and I was like, I have to do something creative now. I have to do something for me now. So I went home. And that was part of my process. Like at the point in time where I started my YouTube channel, I was in rehab, unemployed, and literally rehab with heroin addicts and all sorts of like some of them real crazy people. And that's the origin of my channel. It all came out of this story of where I thought I could not see the other side. I was afraid that there's nothing good can come out of this. My life is over if I come forward. And now I can't believe that that's what my life was for 3 years. Like it's crazy how toxic, unhealthy it was. And now on the other side of all of that, like I have a dream job of talking about movies on YouTube. And
Right.
I couldn't imagine it.
No, and it just because I just pulled up the channel to prove this point of I'm looking at your oldest videos and here he is, fireball to the face, Arrow season 1. You go back and then you took some time off, 6 years and then suddenly 4 years, and then you had this Ghostbusters review and you got 8,000 views back then is no joke.
Right.
And it's sort of the algorithm's paying attention. Suddenly you do a 13 ranking of Star Trek, 20,000 views.
The Star Trek one is the one that really
and
I was like, wait,
you're watching how it works, and you committed, you kept going, you did it, and then you have some things aren't clicking, they start clicking, but you quickly start noticing, okay, this is how it works. And 4 years ago, also let's not ignore, 4 years ago was a little easier than starting it. I feel like it's harder and harder it's getting to start there, but you got in at a good time. You started doing a specific style. You got in there. You didn't give up on it. And I got to go back to saying that paint job. I had a telemarketing job I did, and it's like I hated it, right? But I also am in debt to that job because it helped me normalize myself and like lose the ego, and then also it made me a little bit more hungry again to get back to like doing and building it up and improving. Right? Do we have the drive to succeed? And clearly you proved you did. So you shouldn't knock the paint store. Right at the end of the day, the paint store got you where you are.
Right, and that's the thing. Like, I'm kind of somewhat phrasing it in a way that's talking negative. I have almost nothing bad to say about that job, and it was great people, great experience for me. It's the reason I was able to grow my channels because of that specific job. And but very much on that humbling side to it. I remember my first day on the job riding around with his name is Hector. He's still a good buddy of mine. And so back before theaters closed down, I would still take him to press screenings and stuff like that. But first day on the job, driving around the Austin area, delivering paint. And the previous year, I'd been applying for all these jobs at different churches and had interviews. And I'm driving by like this mega church, 10,000 people. I had an interview with that church. And I interviewed for that church. And there's another one, and it's in like the really swanky, nice part of town. And it would have been these highly prestigious, all this stuff. And now I'm literally going to be picking up paint. And the criteria for me being a good employee is that I can pass a drug test
and lift 50
not
pounds.
Show up too late. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And that is just certainly a humbling experience that kind of pulls out. And I think that's even some of the reason we're even been able to been healthy on this YouTube thing is that my ego had to be beaten out of me before I had any success on YouTube.
Right. Well, you're more relatable now, right? You realize what most people in America are, which is they deliver paint. They don't have mega
Right.
churches or YouTube channels like we had or have. So I do think it helps. And hopefully that'll keep you to your roots so you don't get too big of a head as you continue to talk about movies. Sean, it's a very inspiring story. I'm so grateful you shared it with us. Guys, you can find him obviously over here on Sean Talks Movies or hit him up on Twitter. Kirk Never Died. Sean Chandler Talks Movies. Sean, I'm grateful you've talked to me. A lot of people were afraid to talk to me. I could tell we have some kindred spirits because we've been through it, and I'm inspired by your story. I hope others are as well. You seem like a very good person, a hardworking person. Guys, go support Sean. Anything else you want to plug or say as we wrap this up?
I'm also very active on Instagram. Sean Talks. Sean Talks About is my name over there. Just on Instagram, that's the best place if you want to send me a direct message. Easiest place to get a hold of me.
Go do that. Go show him some love, some support. And if you're out there with the struggle, dude, the struggle is real. Don't be so afraid. Holding on to that lie, continuing to dig yourself into that hole, I assure you will make it 10 times worse. So if you're out there and you're struggling with how do I just tell someone, do what Sean did, get that strength. I wish I'd had the strength to do it sooner in my life, but sometimes life will deal you the way the cards are dealt. But if you can find that strength to do it, I assure you it's going to help you in the long run. Sean, thanks again for watching, everybody. If you are tuning in, make sure to subscribe here to the channel, here on Hugging the Cactus. Stay tuned for more interviews here on the Keep Going podcast. Thanks, everybody.